Signed up. Is anyone that would like to speak that has not had an opportunity to do so? Right. Strike that off the list. Item 3 is approval of minutes. We met on February 22nd. The copy of the meeting minutes are in the packet. Do we have any changes, updates, or motions for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second. All right, a motion, a second, any further discussion? Favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. By the way, Gary is on the way. I'll be here in just a couple of minutes, so heads up on that. Item 4, reports and updates. We have Chief Fanning in the house. Can you give us a quick update?
With a mighty sporty shirt on.
Yes. Yes.
You look at the police report, we didn't have a lot of incidents for February, but you can tell by looking at the dates when the weather got warmer. So the first 3 weeks we had, almost next to nothing. And then the last week of the month, the last 10 days of the month, made up the bulk of it. One of which was we're going to call a burglary at 388 Myrtle, where somebody broke into the back porch and stole some high-end patio furniture. No cameras or no, the house is a little tucked. It's the old, where the old Reinhardt house used to be. And so it's tucked up back there. Nobody saw anything. We don't have any leads at the moment. On the 23rd, we had so the county had a report of a stolen vehicle over an apartment complex over on Ocean Highway. And the car was spotted, had gotten involved in a hit and run down in Georgetown. And they said looked like it was coming back to Pawleys Island. And I actually found it in the south end parking lot with the driver still in the driver's seat, kind of slumped over. And I had requested assistance from the sheriff's office, and they came down and we found the driver was there with he had just shot up heroin. He was kind of slumped over in the seat with not overdosing, but he was still in his euphoria, I guess you could say. But he had a gun tucked under his or in the center console.
Hello.
And so it had potential to be a dangerous situation, and we were able to mitigate it safely. While we were there, somebody backed into one of the sheriff's office cars. So it wound up being 2 incidents with a motor vehicle accident there also. And then the rest of the month, we also had a suicidal person that the sheriff's office had pickup papers on that we found at the Pritchard Street landing the next day, 2 days later, I guess it was. So, when the weather gets warmer, we get a little busier, so we'll see what the spring brings. I'm kind of fearful for Easter week. I think it's gonna be packed. It's so late this year with the weather being warmer.
I think you're right.
Well, it sounds like good relations with the sheriff's department continue.
Yeah, we have a good working relationship with them. We've only had, I think, 1 incident that's happened that I know of that's happened off hours since, after the police department goes home.
Yeah.
So
When does Tracy retire?
I think today is her last day, right? Today's officially her last day.
Okay. Are you guys planning to do anything or have any get together?
We're working on it. We've got a couple of things we're kicking around to see what's appropriate.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
I was just going to say that if and when you do it, I'd like to attend, and I'm sure there's some residents and property owners that probably want to attend as well.
Sure.
I'm going to send out a communication from the mayor sometime in the next few weeks. So if you want me to maybe include something like that, I'm happy to do it. Not if you want
Yeah, I think
a smaller affair.
I think it'd be appropriate to at least acknowledge her service to the town. Yeah.
Yeah, because she's certainly deserving, and she's been a fixture here for a long time. And
How long has she been here?
So she's been right before I got promoted chief. So it's been almost 13 years.
Wow.
how many years?
13.
Wow, hard to believe, huh?
It is.
Certainly appreciate what she's done. I'd like to send her off the right way. Any questions for Chief? All right, next item is 4B, the building report. Copy that is also in your packet. Handful of items on there. Ryan, anything that warrants?
No, spring, so you get a lot of people who prepare their homes for summer vacation season, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Any questions for Ryan on the building report? Financial report is also in your packets, item 4C.
And there's not much activity for January and February. We don't get much of our revenue in the first few months of the year. So it's pretty minimal in terms of expenses and revenue. The only note that I'll make is this, the right-hand column shows the total budgeted amount for the year. That line does not include the changes that were made in the last budget amendment. So those will be reflected in next month's report.
Okay. What questions do y'all have on the financial report?
It's really too early to have very many.
Yeah. February. All right, let's move on to item 5A, which is appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. The Accommodations Tax Committee has had a vacancy for several months now. And then we've also got Zoning Board of Appeals, which is probably has a little more degree of urgency. Because in order to, how many is on that committee? And if we have 2 vacancies, I guess technically you still have a quorum, but can they still meet with?
Yeah, I mean, that's one you don't want to really, I mean, they're on through next month, but it'll expire right around the next month when you meet. So if you have two people to appoint to those positions at your next meeting, we'll pretty much get through it without any hurdles. Won't really be a.
And those 2 individuals have to go through some.
They do, but they have 1 year to complete that, so
Yeah.
they can get on and hit the ground running.
Well, what I would say to this is it's obviously incumbent on us as town council to find those people to be on those committees. The ATAX committee vacancy's been on the agenda for a while. I would just encourage us to be more proactive to find someone. And anyone who's on the Zoom call, please, if you're willing to, step up and serve, we'd love to have you. And then also on that communication that I spoke of, and I'm going to send out in a couple of weeks, I'm going to send out an appeal to if anyone's interested and just give them a quick blurb about what it entails. Hopefully we can have someone. And again, the committees that we have, we don't have a ton of them, but we have enough of them that it's sometimes difficult to fill those spots. So if anyone has any thoughts or ideas or would like to serve, we need you.
I have an idea for the ATAX, but I want to speak to the person first, so.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to item 5B, which is the Planning Commission report. John Lemaster and Ken Leach are here. John Lemaster serves on the Planning Commission, also attends the ARB meetings, and Ken Leach is the chair of the ARB. And just as a kind of a tip off to this, there's been some discussion about the ARB, and obviously when we created the ARB, our goal was to be as flexible as possible, not come out all guns blazing and have a few requirements of the each application. And some time has gone by. We've had a handful or so of applications, 7 applications. And for the most part, those applications have been right in the slot. We feel good that they've met the spirit of what the ARB was intended to do. And may have been 1 or 2 that sort of skirted the line. And I think what that does is brings up the notion of, are we good with ARB or do we need to tweak it some? So in true form, the ARB discusses it and then they can give sort of how the votes turned out. But they discuss it and they make a recommendation to Planning Commission. Planning Commission takes all the merits and of that proposal, and then they bring it to the town council for an official vote. Today is not an official vote. It's more of hey, here's what we're thinking. Tell us if we're in the right direction, and then they can come back at a future date and bring that formally to us via an ordinance or resolution. So with that, I'd like to introduce John and Ken.
Let me just add this out. The version in your packet doesn't include color, so this shows the changes in red.
Just go.
Ryan, you got a copy?
So,
Yeah, I got it.
so as the mayor said, when we did the ARB, we said two things basically. One is that we would start with a really light touch ARB. And ours is a really very light touch ARB. And then we would review it over time based on our experience. And the second thing we said was that we would listen to feedback from our applicants and from our architects and make any changes that they might recommend or consider their changes. So the ARB has unanimously recommended to the Planning Commission 3 changes, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended to the Town Council to make these 3 changes. The changes are really simple, they're straightforward. They're the things Mark read on that handout. These are just preliminary drafts, so that's not necessarily the wording for the final ordinance that needs to be reviewed by Ryan and by the town attorney. But that's just to give you an idea of what we're thinking about. So the first change is to clarify that the ARB has the right and the power to deny designs on a subjective basis that they don't comply with the architectural design guidelines. So this was the intent all along, I believe, and the idea is that the houses should have the subjective Pawleys Island look, not just that they have the 80% on the second floor, and not that they have 4,000 maximum square feet, but that they have this more subjective Pawleys Island look that's described in those guidelines. But that was the intent, as I said, but it was questioned in one of these reviews of one of the houses. And I think based on that it's important that we clarify it in case it's ever challenged in the future. And so we're just making it very clear that the designs have to comply with the guidelines, and the IRB can deny designs because they don't comply with.
And that's line B.
That's right.
All proposed developments must comply with the manual. ARB may deny an application on the basis that the proposed design does not comply with the manual. When you say on a subjective basis, what does that mean?
You know, the roof pitch and the 80% rule and the 44,000 square feet rules, those are fixed and it's objective.
And that's the law.
Right. And if that's all the ARB was enforcing, you really keep the ARB. So the part the ARB comes in is the house, does it look like what we want Pawleys Island house to look like? It's not a box. You know, it doesn't have.
Or it looks like something you don't want.
Right.
Because it's hard to say.
But the guidelines have.
It would be this thick if you had it right there. Exactly everything that you
What you
want.
want.
Just if you know what you're looking at, you know, whether it meets the intent or not.
I think the guidelines give enough guidance to the ARB to make that determination. But there is an element of subjectivity, so it's based on aesthetics.
So, John, when you,
That's,
I'm sorry.
that's a provision that's pretty much built into every ARB set of guidelines, covenants, restrictions. Anywhere you look,
That's gotta be.
it's just meet the intent of what they're going for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I think the concern that I have is, you know, I thought that while the booklet that was put together earlier with some guidelines in it was good and, you know, gave us a bit of the sort of features that we wanted to be represented on a particular house. I don't know that we ever anticipated that you would want to have full compliance. A house would have to have full compliance with that entire manual. It strikes me that these were ideas that Graham kind of threw out at us that would be typical of Pawleys Island house construction and cottages. Yeah, I recognize that you guys are reasonable guys and that, you know, you're going to use your judgment to the best of extent and not unreasonably prevent someone from building a house. But the language, you know, once you guys are gone, somebody else is in, and now maybe somebody's not as reasonable. The language basically says, you're going to comply with the manual, which to me says every single aspect of the manual. I don't know if that was ever really your intent.
But that's not how the manual reads. If you look
Okay.
at the manual, it refers to the mandatory elements, which are the 80% rule on the roof pitch. But then it has a list of recommended elements.
Okay,
And you don't have to tick every single one of those. You just have to have sort of the predominance of it that you have to look. That's where the subjectivity comes in. If it was to check the box and you had to have every single requirement, then it'd be right.
okay.
And if I made one application that was submitted that met those 2 mandatory requirements, but despite recommendations from David Graham, and despite dialogue at the meeting, the builder stuck by his design, which does not comply. That was the one application out of 7 that the ARB felt that they were obligated to approve it because it met those mandatory requirements that would be open to an indefensible position of challenge if it was, but we don't think it has the right look because of what you're doing with the roof, what you're doing with porches and things like that.
It's going up and it's fancy. It's not the bottom.
On the good side, number 6 out of 7 had a little bit of issues that we sent back and they came back from. That's got more to do with the second bullet of recommendations. But in nearly all cases, the message is out there and they're coming in with applications and designs that everybody's pretty pleased to look at. So, I don't know what the batting average is, 6 out of 7 or 5.5 out of 7. It's still pretty good.
And I think
We could fix it a little bit.
one school of thought is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken. One school of thought is, and one way of thinking is the ARB can deny some of these applications with some subjectivity, because that's what the ARB is supposed to do. And I think what you guys are saying is, let's make it even more clear in the design guidelines that we can do it. We should be able to do it. We know, we feel like we can do it, but we want to be clear that we're going to do it, right? I mean, because Ryan, there's one thing you brought up at the meeting when the ARB and the planning commission met is, look, I mean, if we're just adhering to 2 requirements that are the law, then why do we have an ARB?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the roof pitch and the 20%, those are ordinances or passages or laws. Aside from the ARB does not have to even consider those 2, because without meeting those 2, you're not getting a building permit. So the point of the ARB was to take all these design elements that can really only be put into those homes or approved based on having subjective body that says, okay, it looks at the entire house. And the idea is, do they include enough of these preferred design elements in their overall design to get it to the point where it meets the intended look? And it's up to them to say yes or no. And if it doesn't, the idea was not to deny it, but then to work with that property owner to kind of come to an agreement and get it to the point where it is acceptable and then approve it.
That's how top that when sent back. It wasn't denied, it just was, they were working together.
And the reason I asked you a question about before, subjective basis, it's not, I mean, if you have design guidelines that are recommended, you're not being totally subjective. I mean, you've given some guidance and some guidelines. You're not, well, we don't like that, so we're not going to approve it. Well, you might not like it because it doesn't do any of those recommended guidelines that weren't requirements, but they're recommended. So it's not truly subjective. I would say. You had a question?
It's not, it can't be arbitrary. It's got to be based
Correct.
on.
Yeah, there you go. That's a better word.
Some facet.
I can see you loading that task.
No, I just, since we're gonna be voting on this probably the next meeting, I'd like to make sure that I've got a copy of that manual and just take a look at it. As long as the manual gives that flexibility that I was talking about, then I'm cool with that. But I mean, because when you say that it complies with the manual, I read that as, every aspect of the manual, you gotta meet it.
The manual clearly differentiates voluntary criteria from the 2 mandatory criteria.
Okay, I'd be happy to sit down with you to do that.
That'd be cool. Yeah, great.
What are the questions about item 12-9B? Because I know there was also some discussion about the second change. Wasn't there also something to do with the roof, ancillary roof pitch?
That's the third one, that's the last one.
Oh, the third, okay, I didn't see it. Oh, there we go. Got it.
The second one is regarding the pre-design meeting. So previously required the applicant to meet with the zoning administrator, which is Ryan. And experience has shown that when we have an architect to architect interface early in the process, that we prevent a lot of the issues that arise. And so the ARB's recommended and the planning commission recommends that we add that the town appointed architect also attends that meeting.
Mhm.
Simple change.
The experience gain on the other one of the 7 applications that really wasn't a sort of slam dunk was that they did not participate in the meeting with David Graham and he didn't have an opportunity to have some input. we did send an application back for a recycle, and they did make some modifications, but that all could have been avoided and addressed before, prior to the first submission. So just to make it more clear that it's in everybody's best interest to get David and Ryan together with the designer.
It kind of keeps them out of the ditch.
Right.
And keeps them from wasting money.
Right.
All right, how about the third one?
So the third change is in regards to the roof pitch. As you know, currently the requirement is 712 roof pitch for the main roof and a 412 roof pitch for the ancillary roofs, which are dormers and all porches.
712.
The feedback from some of the applicants and their architects has been that we'll have to consider changing the 412 to a 312. So that would flatten it out just a little bit. But David Graham has confirmed that that's almost going to be imperceptible to any of us. The reason for that is that we have a 412 on over a porch, say, that line tends to come into the natural line of the window on that level. And so 312 is easier for them to design like that. It doesn't come into the natural window line. And David Graham says that he's agreed, and he's had struggled on some of the designs he's done to make a 412 work.
So
That's on the ancillary roofs.
Yeah.
that's in the ordinance. The 412 is in the ordinance for an ancillary roofs. You're going to relax the requirement in the ordinance for that particular.
So based on the feedback from the applicants and architects, we're actually loosening the standard.
Okay,
So that's, I mean, that's it as far as what we're recommending at this time.
okay. Is the planning commission meeting again between now and
Yes.
our next meeting?
Next week or two, yes.
Okay. I would just say that if you guys have other questions, if you want to meet offline with John or attend that next planning commission meeting to ask some questions, I think the one that's has probably the most impact is the first item. But to me, that's what the ARB is there to do, to review and make decisions on applications based on work or not, is it appropriate? To me, it's not getting to the Pawleys look, and I've said this before, it's designing something that's appropriate. It's basically what we don't want, in my opinion, but that's just me. Y'all have any thoughts or comments before we move on? I appreciate both of y'all being here. I appreciate both of what you do for the ARB and for the planning commission. I know, it takes time. And sometimes it's hard to get enough people to fill these committees, but we got bang up committees on the ARB and the planning commission. That's because of what you guys are doing. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. Okay. The only item left on the agenda is comments by council members. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up, discuss?
I'd just like to comment about working with David Graham. I worked with him years back on the design and the construction of St. Paul's Walkmore Methodist Church. And I found David very easy to work with. And if the changes were necessary, he could implement those changes to the proper design, et cetera. So I think we're fortunate to have him involved with us.
It represents us very well.
Good.
Thanks, Ashley.
I have just one comment, a little update, really. We've got WAPRO, our backflow preventing valve manufacturer from Sweden coming in next week. They're bringing some Swedish engineers with them in, and I'm going to take them down and show them the area down on Springs that we're looking at as our next implementation, kind of getting them thinking about it, looking at what sort of valving we might need. It's a more complicated scenario than we had here around Town Hall. I think there are 4 outfalls in that particular location. So we got to figure out which of those outfalls need to be valved. I suspect all do not, but we'll see. And then once WAPRO kind of weighs in, I want to get Sanders Brothers in as well, get them. Those are the guys that did our cleaning and installation and replaced one of the pipes that was bad earlier on this installation. Get them down and look at it, and so we can start getting some rough pricing together as well as understand the scope of work that's required and that sort of thing. So anyway, just got some stuff going on there.
Mhm. Thank you. This seems to be working well, the two valves around.
I think
town hall.
so. I mean, I've only seen one case where we really had a little more water than I would have liked, and I think it was a combination of rain and high tide. Maybe it was just some sort of combination that the valve didn't work as it expected. But other than that, I think we've had about, I don't know, half a dozen king tides since we put those valves in. We haven't had a single drop of salt water on the roads.
You would know.
Yeah, I would.
You would know.
And so would everybody that lives on the north end.
That's for sure.
Because they can drive through it.
That's true. That is true. You good?
I'm good.
I am as well. It might have been the fastest meeting ever.
I like it.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.